Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy Rankings versus ECR. I'm Bradley Stalder, representing Fantasy Data this season, this NFL season 2022, in the FantasyPros Accuracy Rankings Contest. Today, I will be going through a few of the players I'm higher than the expert consensus ranking and a few players that I am lower versus the consensus rankings. Now, last year was my first year doing rankings and entering the contest. And the way it works, for those unfamiliar with the Fantasy Pros Accuracy Contest, is that you submit rankings as a fantasy analyst every week for every relevant player, or as many as you can. And then your rankings are compared to not only where those players finished, but compared to the other 170 to 200 analysts that are also in this competition. So there are quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Those are the positions that are taken into account. Last year, as I said, was my first year in the contest on behalf of Fantasy Data. It was tough out of the gate. I was a middle of the pack ranker for most of the season. Some weeks were pretty terrible. One of the weeks, I did get a top 10 ranking for the first half of the season. It was fine. I was okay. But then I figured it out. Like, it just clicked in my brain. And I just started crushing in the second half, especially down the stretch. Week 14, I was second overall in accuracy and first in quarterbacks. Week 16, 10th overall in accuracy, first in quarterbacks. Week 17, first overall in accuracy, sixth in quarterbacks, first in tight ends. And last year, look, I learned a lot from this contest. So I'm going to be sharing with you part of my process in humility in checking my work, changing my process and how I did. I had to throw out the spreadsheet a couple times and just say, screw it, I need to just look at it, look at these rankings by hand. And I felt like Evan Silva and just touching all of the dirt, and the grass. And I can do this by hand. And ultimately I finished with 4 top 10 weekly finishes, 3 of which came in the last 4 weeks, as I mentioned. And so I'm hoping to start strong here in 2022. But before I get into players that I'm higher or lower on for week 1 of the 2022 season, I want to tell you about fantasy data, because this is where I use the information. This is the main source of information I use to make decisions. Use promo code FFF20 for 20% off any fantasy data subscription. If you are new, there are lower price point subscriptions. Or if you want to elevate your price point subscription, use this promo code. Okay? It's not just NFL, although they have Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, even golf, college basketball, and football. But NFL is where I focus on. And I'll tell you some of the things that are on there. There's player stats, player news, NFL depth charts, EDPs, targets, red zone data, snap counts, third down stats. And the snap counts not only tell you about the snaps, but also the target share per game of players. And you can filter based on a certain amount of snaps being played. It's a really great tool. There's team rankings, team stats, points allowed. There's NFL standings and schedules. There's advanced player metrics and efficiency player metrics, and partnering with Player Profiler, cheat sheets and draft boards, dynasty rankings. So all of these are available to you with the Fantasy Data subscription. Use promo code FFF20 for 20% off a Fantasy Data subscription. So, yeah, shout out to us at Fantasy Data for that. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to give one player that I'm higher compared to the expert consensus rankings, and one player that I'm lower versus the ECR per position. So 8 total players. And one player that I'm higher then consensus at quarterback, Jameis Winston. Looking at the weekly quarterback finishes versus the Atlanta Falcons over his career, Jameis Winston has smashed. Only once since 2016 has Winston finished outside the top 16 of quarterbacks, which was in his last start for the Tampa Bay Bucks, where he only threw the ball 24 times. He played all the snaps. Why did he only throw the ball 24 times? It was week 17, and he had already thrown 30 interceptions that season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did not want him throwing more than 30 interceptions. Enter Winston in 2022. He has recovered from his ACL tear. He's had over a year of recovery from LASIK surgery. He has a healthy Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is trending to play during week 1. Jarvis Landry, who had a 25% target share, is now on the Saints. The Saints also mortgaged their 2023 future to make sure they were able to select Chris Olave. Taysom Hill is still on the team. And of course, Alvin Kamara has been a top 5 running back every year he's been in the league on a per game basis. So the Falcons, as a matchup, they're going to be bad this year. And they have a lot of questions on defense in the secondary, linebacking core, defensive line. And with all of these weapons, it's just a smash spot for Jameis Winston. By Sunday, I'm going to have my rankings updated, and Winston will be between quarterback 11 and 13 for me. Now, if you read my article on fantasy data for Jameis Winston, I've included a graphic. And in the 9 games that Jameis Winston has played against the Atlanta Falcons during his career, 5 of them have been as a top 5 quarterback finish. There's weapons. There's history. He's healthy. Let's go, Jameis Winston. A player that I'm lower on for week 1, Aaron Rodgers. And with fading Rodgers in week 1, it comes down to 3 factors. He's missing upside weapons, number 1. The loss of Devontae Adams. We're going to be talking about that for some time. That's critical for sure. But only days away from week 1, the Packers are also probably without Allen Lazard and maybe missing Robert Tonyan too. If the Packers are depending on wide receivers like Christian Watson or Sammy Watkins or Romeo Doubs, that mitigates the access that Rodgers has for massive fantasy upside. Like, we can't expect a 4-touchdown game from Aaron Rodgers if he doesn't have Devontae Adams. Number 2, pace of play. The Packers were one of the slowest pace of play teams in the NFL. And look, Rodgers may be really efficient, but even if he gets to 250 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns, that's 22 fantasy points. It's barely flirting with the back-end quarterback 1 ranking. He needs 250 yards and 3 passing touchdowns to get there. There's a lot that can go wrong for Aaron Rodgers. Now, number 3 is the effectiveness of the running game. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are both expected to carry massive workloads receiving and rushing out of the backfield. And if the running game is effective, we could see the passing volume for Aaron Rodgers go down. This high of an ECR, I think, is mostly influenced by the fact that Aaron Rodgers is a back-to-back MVP. It's the real football influencing the fantasy. Rodgers will likely fall into this quarterback 16 to 18 range for me by Sunday, even though his ECR is as quarterback 12. We finished quarterbacks. Let's talk about running backs. A running back that I'm higher on this week, week 1, Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon has 2 separate stretches, one of 4 games, one of 6 games over the last 2 seasons, and that's including the playoffs. He's averaged 16 or more PPR points in those per game in those games. And while Ronald Jones and Isaiah Pacheco both made the team alongside Jerick McKinnon, it's the pass catching role that was confirmed in the preseason that we want to see Jerick McKinnon reprise, and that's going to be fantasy value. Now, I expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire as to be the early down back, but we saw McKinnon handle double-digit carries in all 3 playoff games. The Chiefs trust a reliable veteran, and I think his ranking is more of a mid-pack to late running back 4 instead of the ECR's running back 59, almost a running back 6. Now, this is kind of a cheap one where you're like, well, you're not digging that deep, but this is one of those high reward, low risk type of rankings. Like, we're in a contest. I'm competing against other analysts. If there's a player to go off, it's Jerick McKinnon in a good offense, right? There's been a lot of hype for Isaiah Pacheco. He's a 7th round rookie. The Chiefs trust Jerick McKinnon. And this is a low risk, high reward type of thing because most fantasy analysts are going to keep McKinnon in that running back 55 to running back 70 sort of range. Whereas if I can get him into running back 45 or even running back 40, I don't know if I'm going to go that high. But if he smashes, if he has a good week, I'm high on this. I want to be high on Jerick McKinnon above consensus this week. Now, on the opposite side, a lower rank running back, Chase Edmonds. I like Edmonds for season long. Let me just put this out there. But I am concerned that he's dealing with a groin injury, and that's kind of the domino effect that I see in place. And the Dolphins may smash against the Patriots, but there's Raheem Mostert as a change of pace back. Myles Gaskin could be used if it's really garbage time, just to preserve Edmonds, who was a priority free agent for the Miami Dolphins, signing a 2-year, $12 million deal. But he's a pass-catching back with a groin injury entering week 1. Now, he was removed from the injury report, but this is a soft tissue issue, and I think that they may still hand the ball off to Chase Edmonds, the Dolphins will, but I am concerned about his route running. And that's where Chase Edmonds makes his money in fantasy, is through this route running. The addition of Tyreek Hill and his 25% target share, that's going to keep Jalen Waddle's targets close to the line of scrimmage too, especially to start the season, as the Dolphins are still figuring out how they want to use all of these weapons. Waddle finished as the 6th lowest air yards per target wide receiver and the 11th shortest target distance wide receiver last season. So I expect that Waddle gobbles up these close to the line of scrimmage targets that would be going to Edmonds. And I think we'll go to Edmonds later in the season, but I'm not confident it happens week 1. So I expect that Edmonds does project as the early down back, and Raheem Mostert will spell him from time to time. Myles Gaskin, maybe if it's used in a blowout. But as I said before, I have optimism for Edmonds season long, but I expect a slow start against New England. And Edmonds is currently the running back 23, most likely going to be in the running back 27 to 29 range for me on Sunday. We'll move to wide receivers. And this is a popular name. Marquise Brown is going to smash on Sunday. With DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games, Rondell Moore officially ruled out for Sunday, and Zach Ertz dealing with a calf injury, Hollywood Brown's reunion with college quarterback Kyler Murray couldn't come at a better time. Brown has commanded a 26% target share each of the last 2 seasons on the Baltimore Ravens, and now there's a clear pathway to opportunity in week 1. The ECR market hasn't reacted appropriately enough. Right now, Marquise Brown is the wide receiver 17. When the dust settles by Sunday, I anticipate that ECR will inch up to wide receiver 12. That's my prediction. But I'm already there. And I was already there, and I think he's going to be even higher than wide receiver 12. I want to be in on Marquise Brown week 1. A wide receiver I'm lower on than consensus is Amari Cooper. There were 8 instances during the 2019 season and 5 instances during the 2017 season where an Indianapolis Colts wide receiver accumulated 70 or more yards in a game. What do those 2 random seasons so long ago have to do with Amari Cooper in 2022? Well, those 13 times that a wide receiver had 70 or more yards in a game, the 13 times in a 32 game sample, so it's not a small sample size, 32 games, that's the Jacoby Brissett effect. And that's who's going to be starting week 1 against Carolina. Cooper himself only had 4 70 or more receiving yard contests in 15 games last year. He's already not at a good rate of getting yardage. If he's not getting yardage, the Browns are probably not going to be throwing to him in the end zone. Like, let's think about this for a second. You're the Cleveland Browns. You're in the 10-yard line. Are you going to be passing to Amari Cooper? Or are you going to be handing the ball off to Nick Chubb? You're handing the dang ball off to Nick Chubb or dumping it off to Kareem Hunt. Let them make the moves. Cooper is most likely an afterthought with a projected game script leaning heavily on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I think Cooper is at best a back end wide receiver 4. We're talking wide receiver 46 to 48. I think wide receiver 46 is generous, and that's where I'll have him in my rankings this week. At best, wide receiver 46. Amari Cooper's ECR is wide receiver 33. Stay away from Amari Cooper week 1. Finally, we'll get into the tight ends. And a tight end I'm bullish on for week 1, Gerald Everett. And Everett quietly put up a respectable efficiency season with Seattle. He finishes tight end 13 in fantasy points per target and tight end 16 in target share, despite finishing tight end 21 in targets. So he made the most of his targets. Going from Russell Wilson to Justin Herbert, that can be debated as a lateral move. But from moving from the Seahawks to the Chargers, that cannot be described as a neutral or lateral move. The Seahawks are one of the slowest pace of play and run-first teams, and the Chargers are one of the most pass-heavy and fastest pace of play teams in the NFL. So it's a completely different animal. Additionally, how the Chargers used the tight end last year, in particular Jared Cook. Jared Cook had a 13-14% target share last season, and he ran the 8th furthest distance among all tight ends. That's where his targets were 8th furthest. Gerald Everett was 24th. Everett was not running deep routes as a tight end. So, in summary, better offense, better distance, better tight end, baby. That felt like a Papa John commercial. But by Sunday, Gerald Everett is in the tight end 12 to 14 range for me. He's tight end 17 right now, and I'm leaning closer to the tight end 12 than the tight end 14 side of that range where I want to have him. So I'm bullish on Gerald Everett. I want pieces of this LA Chargers offense. They've got a good offensive line. They've got good wide receivers. They now have a good tight end who's not 35 years old and crusty. Okay, Gerald Everett is an athlete, and he's going to smash week 1. Finally, last player I'm highlighting for week 1, Hunter Henry. And this is a tight end that I'm fading. He finished as tight end 15 last season in fantasy points per game. He also finished with only 18, only the 18th highest target share. And for me, it's a lot of factors, but it's one of the biggest ones is this convergence. So 2 storylines converging this offseason. One is that the Patriots offense seems to be dysfunctional under Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. And the other is the reemergence of Jonnu Smith. And so the intersection of those storylines gives me worry just about Hunter Henry's situation. There and detractors will say, well, hey, but Hunter Henry, we got to have him there. There's a reason why he's tight end 12, right? The expert consensus. There's a reason why he's there. Yes, 7 weeks last season, Hunter Henry was a top 12 tight end. But if you look deeper, 5 of those 7 weeks, 5 of them were tight end 11 or 12. He barely made it. Skin of his teeth. One fewer target in a few of those games, and we're talking about completely different season for Hunter Henry. Not to mention that Jacoby Myers and Devontae Parker have each commanded 20% or more targets each of the last 2 seasons, both of them. And then finally, PFF, Pro Football Focus, is projecting only 8% of targets per route for Henry this Sunday. What does that mean? The pie is just really small for Henry. It's a bad bet to say that Henry is going to go off against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. Hunter Henry is the ECR tight end 12. He's going to fall outside of the top 16 for me pretty easily. He's most likely swapping spots with Gerald Everett, if not further. All right, since you're such a great audience, I'm going to give you one more, and that's Baker Mayfield. And this is not mostly a statistical or statistically driven take, but it's the narrative. Like, we know that Baker Mayfield is a capable quarterback. He had 5 different quarterback efficiency metrics that were in the top 10 back in 2020. Jacoby Brissett, nowhere close. Jacoby Brissett has never had a top 10 efficiency metric in his career in any season. But Baker Mayfield, plus Christian McCaffrey, plus DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and his boy Rashard Higgins. It's a revenge game narrative. And I think Baker Mayfield is going to finish higher than quarterback 25. So there's my bonus for you. I think it's a Baker Mayfield revenge game. If you liked this analysis, check out my rankings. At the bottom of the fantasy data article for Fantasy Rankings versus ECR, I have my rankings and they are dynamic. So keep checking them throughout this weekend so that you have the most up-to-date rankings. Player situations might change or the market might change on a player and I need to adjust. Okay. And as I tell you, reacting to the market is important because not only could there be a reason why a player could get injured or change the situation, or maybe the weather is bad. Maybe it's that, or maybe there's a reason that I'm not sure about or that I'm weighing, but the market is weighing. And if I don't have a strong take on a player, I don't want to be taking an unnecessary risk. Okay. And I don't think you want to either in looking at what is the most likely scenario for this player. Okay. We're taking a step back. Philosophy of rankings. What is the range of outcomes for this player? And if you don't want to be too far off, like we don't need to make strong cases for every single player. And this is almost against the natural tendencies of fantasy analysts. Over the summer, during the off season, we are trained and conditioned to have strong takes on every single player. Strong takes. And if you win on those, you win big. And if you lose big. And what you find is that we are wrong a lot. But minimizing that wrongness allows us to minimize this range of outcomes and expectations for a particular player, which then allows us to have better insights into what can actually happen, what is most likely to happen. And this ultimately makes us better players, right? If we have a better understanding of what are the ranges of outcomes for players. Okay. Enough of that. It's been a lot of fun. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of great data and analysis, and my colleagues at Fantasy Data have been doing a great job all off season. And I'm excited to jump into the week 1. Already a fantastic game. The Buffalo Bills dominated Thursday night against the LA Rams, and it was a great way to start the season. And I'm excited for Sunday. So if you haven't followed me on Twitter, you can follow me at FF Stalder. You can send me DMs, ask questions about why'd you rank this player higher or lower, and I can give my reasons and some matchups and also give you some insights into what the market is telling me as well. and reacting appropriately. So it's going to be a lot of fun this year. I'll be doing these weekly. Check it out. It's going to be lots of fun. I appreciate y'all. Until next time, we'll see you in the fantasy football streets.